you ever wondered the best time to do a home inspection? If you're getting ready to list, should you do it before you list? And what are the implications of that? If you're a buyer, should you trust the home inspection that the seller had done before they listed? There are so many different questions that come up about home inspections. So today I'm taking you on a behind the scenes tour in historic Harmony with our Coldwell Banker Regional Vice President, John Perry. Let's dig into it and go find all the answers to those questions. And these are the answers that you're not going to get online. Let's go check it out.
A home inspection is helping them understand what is actually going to occur, right? So let's talk about non-invasive versus invasive. The sewer camera test is an invasive test by definition, right? We're going in through a sewer line with a camera to do that. Outside of the garage, which is even still a driveway, you can't see any foundation walls. We can use things like moisture meters and those kinds to somewhat check what's going on. Now, the other benefit of this is there's nothing really underground, right? But if there were foundation walls underground and the basement was fully finished, a home inspector is not going to open up drywall and check to see if there is water leaking behind a wall or those kind of things, right? They don't do things like they do very minimally, but like they're not taking plate covers off of those outlets or those kind of things to see behind. They'll only open out two systems and in the house. Does anybody know the two systems they'll actually take a cover off of? The electrical panel box, yes, because they need to see are there double taps or there improper wiring and any of those kind of things. Is there, especially if it's an older home. There's another major thing that they check for with the electrical box because they can't see it in the walls is a type of wires. And we know what type of wiring they look for in the panel box once they open it up. It's actually aluminum wire. The second system, anybody want to take a guess on the second system that an inspector will actually take a cover off of and look in? Furnace. The furnace, that's exactly right, okay? Now, they're looking for several different things in those. They're actually looking for condensation leaks is the number one thing in furnace. So they're gonna look for any moisture, any rust, any of those kind of things, because a lot of times your condensation pipe that comes off the furnace and they have air conditioning on it will back up, get clogged, it'll leak, it'll back up into the condenser box itself. And when it drips in the condenser box, it will rust and cause all kinds of problems in the furnace. And most people don't do what they're supposed to do, which is get their furnace serviced every single year. And so what do they end up with? They end up with lots of issues inside the furnace. Those are the only two things that they typically will go into unless we have aligned with them to do an invasive camera test on the sewer line of the house. Otherwise, it's all surface level inspection, right? So at the end of the day, when it comes to a home inspection, your responsibility is to actually prep this up. What I noticed right off the bat is none of the outlets have the GFCI protection. But what'll happen is an inspector will come in here, they will test that, right? They will plug a tester into an outlet out here and they'll trip that GFCI and make sure these outlets go up. Why? Because any outlet within a certain amount of water has to have a GFCI protection, right? Ground fault circuit interrupter is what that stands for. So that's the first thing they're going to cover in every single room is they're gonna check it. The other thing that they will do, right, is they will test the dishwasher, the oven, those kinds. So they're gonna actually turn them on, make sure they get up to temperature. They're gonna run the dishwasher and make sure it's not leaking all over the place. If you ever attend a home inspection, you'll find that a lot of times they'll start in the kitchen because a dishwasher cycle might take 45 minutes to an hour. And they're gonna probably be at that house for a couple hours, so they're gonna wanna make sure they give time for that thing to run. If there's a garbage disposal, which there is in this one, right? The switch is under the sink. They're gonna run water, run the garbage disposal. They will check those mechanical systems. They are gonna check things like cabinet doors. Do they open and close properly? If there was a refrigerator here with a water line, they'll check the water, the water ice maker, those kind of things. The other things they're going to do, and this will be true by everywhere, they will check the windows to make sure they open and close. And there's one other function that they make sure the windows do. Does anybody know what it is? Stay open? Stay open. Because it's a safety concern. If my window is open and my child goes and leans at the window and then the window comes crashing down and the kid gets hurt, that's a problem, right? Same with sliding glass doors in this case, right? So you've got a sliding glass door. Does it open and close and does it lock properly? Do not test public water unless required for some reason, or you will at some buyers. But if we're in a situation where there is a well, how many tests can be done on a well for water? So there are 3 main tests that can be done on well. Flow, which is how many gallons per minute are we getting out of the water, right? Bacteriological, which you'll hear potability. Is it drinkable? Does it have any bacteria that is going to cause you any sickness, right? The third one is a little bit more intensive, right? And that is actually what they call a dissolved solids, where you'll hear it called nitrates, nitrites, and lead. Can take 7 to 10 days at a lab to get those tests back. Bacteria is about 24 to 48 hours. Flow test happens on the spot. Light fixtures, as they go through, they will test and make sure light fixtures go on and off, audio on 3 switches. Upstairs, the bedrooms are treated almost identical as the living rooms, right? So there's going to be outlets, they'll test windows, they'll test light fixtures, anything along those lines, but there's not much else for them to test. They will check doors, every door in the house interior. They will check this. They're going to just make sure, does it open, close, does it latch properly, right? If it locks, does it lock and unlock properly? For bathrooms, again, same deal. They're going to run the water on sinks. They're going to flush the toilets. You also see a lot of times, you'll see an inspector come and they're going to check the set of the toilet. They'll literally, most of them will straddle the toilet with their legs and they'll squeeze it and they'll just wiggle back and forth. Does the toilet stay where it's at? This is a very updated new version of an electric panel. You won't see a whole lot that look like it. It's very fancy, right? So you'll see a bunch of these that say AF and GF on it. Earth fault protector or a ground fault protector. So GFCI is a ground fault. Is it grounded? Is there a spark to it? Arc fault was there an arc in the current going through that? So you'll see that some of these are both arc fault and ground fault, and some of them are only arc faults. The other thing that I always like to point out is there's 3 options for residential electrical service: 100, 150, and 200. Typically in newer boxes, it's very, very easy to identify. If you look at the main switch here, it says 150. We know this is a 150 amp service panel, which is also important. Why? Because a lot of your sellers won't know what that means. And there's a question on their seller disclosure that says, how many amps is your service panel? Well, theirs is 150 in this case, right? Now, if this was a real home inspection, they would take these screws out, they would take this panel off, and they would look to see, are these breakers that are tied in, are they properly wired? Is there what's called a double tap? A double tap means there's 2 sets of lines going to the same breaker. That is not supposed to happen, especially if there are open breaker spots. So you can see that there are 2 open breakers on this panel. Your furnace here, you can see that we have a gas line coming in, so we know that it's a gas furnace. So anytime they're going to do this, they're going to check all the gas line, any joints that they can get to with this gas line, they're going to check that gas line for any leaks. They will take this panel off, again, to check your heat exchanger, all the functionality of this. They're going to make the furnace cycle. They're going to go up and they're going to hit the thermostat. They kick it on, make sure it goes through a full cycle, gets up, heats up, gets to temperature, turns off. A lot of home inspectors, not all of them, will even have a little heat sensor gun, and they'll actually check the heat coming out of vents off them with an infrared sensor to say, yes, there's 102 degree air coming out of that vent, or there's not. We know there's an issue. Now, they will not test an air conditioning unit if the outside temperature is below 60 degrees. It is unsafe to run the air conditioning unit. So keep that in mind to set the expectations for your buyers. There is no temperature restriction for turning the furnace on now. You can live in a home in Pennsylvania without air conditioning. You cannot legally live in a home without heat. This beats the standard of code. So this is a fire rated 5/8 inch drywall, most likely. I can't see the sticker anywhere. But most likely this is a 5/8 inch minimum drywall because it has to be that to be a code. Anytime you have an integral garage, means that the garage is within the structure of the house, right? It's not a fully attached or detached. Anytime it's attached to a wall in the house, that wall is supposed to be fire rated, right? By nature, parking a vehicle in a garage is a combustible element to the house, right? So your sensors, when they do their detection, they're going to check your garage and they're going to move themselves up on the sensors to make sure it goes off. You can see as I keep going in front of it, not loud, keep liking to make sure that the CT switch goes, that it stops it from going up and down. You can see here there is a GFI outlet in here, which I'm guessing both outlets in this garage are projected by a GFI outlet. As you look in your garage or your lookers, most of the time you're going to see is there a hose bib. So remember I said there's a shower. If you look, so you see a hose bib there, you're going to see a couple outlets, you're going to see the garage door opener and the functionality of that. We've checked the lights, so they're going to check to make sure it goes up and down and seals properly. You'll also notice that in this garage, there is no floor drain in this garage. You also notice because of that, a floor is pretty substantially sloped, right? So this meets code by sloping the garage floor to drain out through, which is also why you're seeing a air gap here at the bottom of this, because this drain channel is meant to get rid of all of the water or snow that came off your car. One thing I would say about home inspection reports are, your home inspection is not your time to nickel and dime and beat up a seller, right? Two things should be true. One, if you can see something as a buyer or buyer's agent walking through the house, which means it is a open defect, not a latent defect. When I'm walking through the house, can I see if an outlet is GFI protected by just looking at it? No, I don't know that. I need a home inspector to tell me this. I need a home inspector to tell me whether or not the water is working properly, or there's leaks somewhere, or there's a carbon monoxide leak or a gas leak or something along those lines, right? I can't see those things. Those are latent defects. By the way, as a listing agent, it's okay to have the dialogue with the buyer's agent to say, I noticed that you signed the seller disclosure. Before we execute this offer, I want to make sure that these things are acknowledged by the buyers. We're not coming back and renegotiating for the roof and the air conditioning and the furnace, because they're all working right now. I also would say to you, it's another great way to utilize home warranty to overcome that objection. We recognize that the furnace and the roof and the air conditioning and those kind of things are of this age. So we're adding a home warranty for you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, at that time in order for you to be able to have the peace of mind of buying this house that if something happens to your mechanical systems in the first year, it's not going to be a total out-of-pocket expense. You'll have the home warranty to help you with whatever that may be. To me, the number one reason a deal falls apart in real estate as well, it's because we don't do our job of setting expectations clearly with the clientele coming in. And so if you have a better understanding of what happens during the home inspection, and you can have a better conversation with both sets of clients going into the transaction about this is what can, should, or would possibly happen, you can overcome half of those just with having a conversation up front. The number one reason I think a pre-inspection is a great idea for your sellers is because it gives them the peace of mind of knowing once they've negotiated their contract, even if the buyer does their own inspection, which we would encourage them to do, they're probably not going to find anything else to make. An inspector, they're human. They may miss something small. They missed a GFI, protected outlet, or they, missed something tiny on there. But if it's a decent, well-reputable home inspection company, chances are everything major in that home inspection is going to be found. So I say, okay, great. One of the things that we may want to do is do a pre-inspection. And then once you do that, you have two different options. One, you're either disclosing everything properly based on what the pre-inspection said, or you're shifting and going, okay, I'm going to get a contractor in here and I'm going to fix all these things prior to, so I'm going to update my seller disclosure and say that pre-inspection allows you to do. You could also then advertise that the house was pre-inspected, right? It was pre-inspected on this date, such and such, by this company, those kind of things. Again, we're not telling a buyer not to do a home inspection on their own. Matter of fact, we would want them to still do that because it's another layer of removal of liability from the list side, from the sellers. If they've had a pre-inspection and the buyers have an inspection, well, guess what? They discover something after their ownership, then there's a high likelihood that was a new issue that came about once the house was already being lived in, which changes to that happen all the time. We see things that change on home inspections often. All right, we'll pretend Susan's going to be my pretend client now this time. So Susan has parents who unfortunately passed away, and nobody's been in the house for quite some time, but even when they were, it was only mom living in that house for years on her own. And you can understand that one elderly person using a home uses it significantly differently than a family of five that then moves into the house, right? And that's where setting those expectations with your buyers going into a home inspection and going into homeowners group, especially if they're first-time homeowners, understanding, helping them learn and know. It's also why a home warranty would be really almost a non-negotiable for me for first-time home buyers. Because first-time home buyers need to know, like, what is it that they're bidding themselves into? Why are they buying this house? What are the expectations of the risk of ownership?
From just the seller standpoint, like whenever we get the report and it's like this one outlet, do they have to individually list every single one of those items then on the seller's disclosure?
So it's a great question. So if there are things that are brought up during a pre-inspection from the seller side, do they have to list all of them? Technically, yes. Or they have to have their own expert refute to some of those concerns. Okay, so they don't believe that on inspection, because remember also, and then this will bring me to a good point, and that's a great question. You're going to see a lot of language in a home inspection report that says things like this: seek additional professional guidance on this, right? Because a home inspector is not a structural engineer. A home inspector is not a plumber. A home inspector is not an HVAC contractor. A home inspector is not an electrician. You're going to say things like, there's a potential this could be nearing the end of its life. The roof could, like, no kidding, right? If our solar disclosure said the roof was put on in 2000 and it's 24 years old, well, it's 25 years old now, and the home inspector says there's no active lease, but the roof is reaching its end of its life. Well, yeah, no kidding, it's 25 years older, right? Like, there's no roof on the plant that's really going to make it much longer than that. Now, it's not actively leaking and it was disclosed. Great, like nothing you have to do there, right? So it depends on what it was. Now, if they say, oh, there's a potential gas leak at the furnace, different story. You should probably have somebody come out and check the gas leak, right? And then put into the solar disclosure if there was a gas leak or not. In that case, if you've repaired the gas leak that was found, you don't have to do anything, right? That's not a structural defect, but it's something that would come up on another inspection. By the way, too, just this is a nitpicky thing for me, is it always drives me crazy. A new roof is not an upgrade.
So general maintenance. Yeah, Paul. General maintenance of the home is not an upgrade.
If you're thinking of buying or selling in 1 week or 1 year, give me a call, shoot me a text, or send me an email so I can help you make a smooth move in Pittsburgh. Until next time, I hope to show you around.